Hello and welcome to my first proper video. Now in this video I'm going to cover the basics of Python, which will hopefully give us a decent start to my future videos where hopefully I will get a little bit more complex, if you like, with regards to the stuff that we learn and what we program. Now in this video I'm going to cover installing Python and an IDE. The IDE I'm going to use is Pycharm. An IDE is an integrated development environment, and what that means is it's basically a program that allows us to code. So in this case, Python. So we can code Python, and we can also run the program within Pycharm. The next thing is we are going to cover the very basics of any coding language, which is a print statement. So we're going to start off by printing a simple hello world, which is how everyone seems to start when they learn a coding language. We're also going to go into some of the data types, so strings, integers, floats, booleans. We are also going to talk about numbers and maths, so what we can do with Python with regards to adding, subtracting, stuff like that. Then we will go into input functions. So an input function is where we actually get data inputted from a user, and then using variables, which we'll go later on, we can then start to do things with the information that has been put in. To finish off, I will have two basic challenges. So what I'll do is I have already written the program so that you can see it working, and then I will rewrite the code and talk you through the way that I have coded it. Now, bear in mind that I'm only touching the surface of these subjects, so you can find out a lot more information online, but the video could be hours and hours and hours long if I were to try and cover every single thing within these different subjects. So it's just the basics, and I will also put some resources in the comments, no, not in the comments, sorry, in the description, that will allow you to be able to go and do some of your own research. So I am going to now move on to installing Python and Pycharm. So if we go to Google, type in Python. We're looking for the Python website, so python.org. Once we've clicked that, you can hover over downloads and you will see download for Windows Python 3.9.1. If I click that, it will prompt me to download the file. Now, I'm not going to do that because I have already downloaded it and installed it, but if you have installed any program on Windows 10, it's the same process. So you click Save File. Once it downloads, you then run the installation and finish that. Once you've installed that, we will then install Pycharm. So all we're going to do is just search Pycharm at the top into Google. We want JetBrains. You click that, we go down to download. In my case, I'm on Windows, so I'll make sure it's on Windows. If you're on Mac, you would click Mac and Linux. So Windows. You've got professional and community. We are going to go with the community option because it's free and it does what we need it to do at the moment. So same as downloading and installing Python, we just click download, save file, and then go through the installation process when it pops up. Now, I'm assuming that you've now downloaded and installed Python and Pycharm, so I'm going to move on to opening up Pycharm. Go down to the bottom here, type in Pycharm. So I've got this one, Pycharm Community Edition 2020.3.2. Now, if this is your first time opening this up, it may look a little bit different for you. So it may actually come up with this, which says create a project. The rest of this you can sort of leave as it is. The only thing you might want to change is the location, which tells Python where you want to save the Python files that you are writing. So if you click on the little folder there, you'll have this, and you can just select where you want it to save. I'm not going to click create because I already have my project created, but when you have chosen your location, you click create, and then you should see something similar to this. Now, when I first installed Pycharm, the text here was really small. It was quite hard to see. So if that's the case for you and you want to make it bigger and easier to see, if you click File at the top here, go down to Settings, if you find the Editor tab, so if it's closed, just click the arrow and it'll open up. Click Font, and you can see the size. I can't remember what it was as standard. It might be 12, I think. So I've changed it to 18. So once you've changed it to whatever size you want, just click Apply or OK, and that's that. Now, if you go down to the bottom, you'll see Python console. If you click that, that will open up a console down the bottom, which I'm going to close that. So you have two windows, if you like, top and bottom. The top one is where we write the Python code. When we run the code, the result is displayed in the bottom window. Now, in order to run a code, if you look at the top, you will see the word run, and then the first option is run main. Now, this may not say main for you. It depends what you have named your file. So my file is called main.py. That's why it says main. If you name yours test.py, it will say run test. Now, you can do this each time you want to run it, or you can just click Shift and F10 on your keyboard, which is what I shall be doing. So we are going to start off with our first print statement. So this is the most basic command. We're going to write print, open and close parentheses, double quotes, and whatever we write inside the double quotes will be printed. So we are going to say hello world. If I run that, so Shift and F10, you'll see at the bottom here it says hello world. So what is this doing now? When you run it, Python is coming down and it is going, okay, right, so I've been told to print something. It's going to look inside the parentheses here, and it's going to see a string, which is a data type. And it knows it's a string because it has these double quotes. So it's got double quote at the start, double quote at the end. So Python knows that whatever is inside these double quotes, it needs to print. It just needs to print whatever it says. Doesn't matter what it says, it will just print it out into a console. So you can use double quotes or you can use single quotes. So if I were to highlight that and just do single quotes, it will change it to single quotes. Alternatively, you can just get rid of that and just start off with single quotes. Now that allows strings to be a little bit flexible because, for example, if you were a person who uses single quotes for everything or for all strings, and you wanted to say hello world, it's sunny. Now if I print that, it will say hello world, it's sunny. Now to be grammatically correct, I need to put a single quote in between the T and the S. Now if I did that, let's see what happens when I run it. So it comes up with an error. You can see it says invalid syntax from the S. Now the reason for that is Python's coming down, it's seeing that it needs to print something, it's seeing the start of the parentheses here, it knows it's a string because of the single quote, it's reading all this, and then it's going to get to this here. Now it doesn't know what this is doing other than closing a string because it's a single quote. So all it's doing is essentially just reading that as a string. So now Python's got to here, it's closed the string and then it's got to the S and it doesn't know what to do from the S onwards. So it is basically just that. Now in that case, what we can do is if I get rid of that for the minute, if I were to use double quotes to show that it's a string, that would allow me to put my single quotes where it needs to be. So you can use in a program, you can use a mixture of single quotes and double quotes, depending on what you have inside. So if I were to say I wanted to have world in double quotes, or printed so that it had double quotes, I would need to, let's say if I got rid of that, so I wanted that in double quotes, I'd need to convert it to single quotes, and then I could put the double quotes there, and it would print that. Now, the next bit, I like using double quotes, so I'm just going to get rid of that and put double quotes back. So, with the print statement, if I wanted a new line, so if I were to say, my dog is 3 years old, if I wanted a new line that stated her name, I could say print, her name is Tiny. If I were to run that, that would appear, my dog is 3 years old, and then a new line, her name is Tiny. Now, another thing I can do, which would make it look a little bit neater, is I could just have it here, her name is Tiny, but in between the two sentences, I would have a \n. Gonna get rid of this. I run that, it does exactly the same thing. Full stop there. So it does the same thing. So this \n makes a new line. The other thing I can do is, if I keep that, so I could concatenate two strings. So let's see if I can get rid of that. Be easier. So I can end a string there. So that's one string. I can put a plus symbol and create a new string. So I can say her name is Tiny. If I run that, it adds the strings together, but it doesn't have a space in between the two sentences, because all you've done is just put a plus, and Python will read this plus as a concatenate the two sentences, the two strings. So it will just join this last one onto the one before. So in order to have a space there, you can do one of two things. You can either put a space at the end of the first sentence, but before the ending of the double quote. If I print that, you can see it generates a space there. Or I could do that. So if I print that, it does the same. It has a space there. So what that does is prints the first sentence, prints the second, or sorry, not first sentence, the first string, prints the second string, which contains a space, and then it prints the last string. So if you look, remember I said earlier that anything that is in quotes, double or single quotes, Python considers it a string, and it will just print out what is inside those quotes. So if we start the quote, we've got our text, we end the quote. Now we've put a plus here, so Python knows that that is a command, that's not part of the string. It's not just going to print that out. And then we've started another string, we put a space in here, so it just print out space. We've closed it, here we have another command, and then the last sentence here. So if I were to, let's say, forget my quotes, so if I were to write something like that, so that's more or less the same as what I have just written, except it doesn't have the correct usage of the double quotes. So if I print that, it will just print everything that is inside the quotes, because it, like I said, it treats everything inside as a string, so it will just print it out. Now the other thing that I want to talk about is commenting. Now obviously we have one line of code at the moment, so we don't really need to comment anything. But as we start writing more and more, it is handy to have little comments. And those comments aren't read by Python. They are simply for the user or the coder, the programmer, to leave little notes so that they can look back in the past. Sorry, they can look in the future they can look back on the code and they know what each section does. It's also handy for if you have many people working on one project. One programmer can write a bit of code and they can add comments to tell the next programmer what they've done or what each line does or anything like that. So in order to create a comment, you need the pound sign, which is that. So anything after that on that line, Python will not read. It is just considered a comment. So I could just put, this is a comment. I want to make it a bit easier to read, I can put space. Now if I were to print or run this, you can see all it does is run the print that we made earlier, but it doesn't do anything with this. If I got rid of that pound, then try to run it, then it would have an error because this isn't a command, it's nothing. The other thing, so I can just do that for one line. If I wanted to do many lines, so I'm just, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to write this loads of times. So if I wanted to comment all of this out, rather than going through each one and doing that, I can just highlight the whole thing. I can push on my keyboard Control and / and it will it will comment everything out that I've highlighted. If I wanted to uncomment it, I could highlight it again and just do Control / again, and it would get rid of the comments. So we'll be using comments in either one or both of the challenges a bit later on. Okay, so now we'll move on to data types. So there's 4 data types that we are going to talk about. One of them we already have, which is strings. The other data type is integers. The other one is floats, and the other one is booleans. So integers are whole numbers. That's it. So it's 1, 5, 698, 1,000. So it's just whole numbers. Floats are decimal numbers, so that can be 0.2, 2.6, 2023.58, so anything with a decimal. Booleans are simply true or false statements, that's it. So it's either true or something is false, that's it. Now, we're not going to talk about booleans that much now, because we can talk about them a bit more later on, particularly when we get to the if statements, so we can talk about it then. So I'm going to get rid of that, but just so you know what they are. So I'm going to get rid of that. So now we are going to talk about integers and floats and what we can do with them with regards to the maths side. If I were to write print 2 + 2, now hopefully by now you would know that Python is just simply going to write 2 + 2. Now I don't want that though. I actually want Python to add 2 and 2 together, which makes 4. So I need to get rid of these so that it doesn't treat it as a string. It will treat it as an integer. If I run that, it will now come up with 4, so it adds them together. So you have to remember, integers generally don't have the quotes, double or single quotes. So in this case, Python has got a number, an integer, you've got the plus command, and you've got that, so it knows that it needs to add the 2 together. So you can do that for, so print 4 - 2, print 2 × 3, print 10 divided by 5. We have another print, which is, we're going to say 2 to the power of 3. And we have a modulus as well, which I'll explain in a minute, which we will say So we will say 10 %sign and 2. Okay, so at the top here we have addition. Now this will hopefully be 4. Let me just space that out. Subtraction, it should be 2. Multiply, which will be 6. Divide, which will be 2. And we have 2 to the power of, so 2 times 2 is 4, so that's 8. And we have the modulus here, which is going to be, so this basically shows the remainder of the division, which will be 0. I'll explain this a little bit more. Okay, so these are the basics of what we have with regards to maths side of Python. So if I ran this, let's see, maths isn't my greatest subject, so let's see. So we have the top one is 2 plus 2 is 4. Second one is 2, 6, division is 2, power is 8, and modulus of 0. Now, if you notice the division, so this is division, and it shows it in decimal form, so it will show it as a float. Now, if we didn't want that, we can just simply add second there like that, so second forward slash, and it would divide it still, but it would just show it as a whole number. Now, hopefully you all know this, and if you don't know what this is called modulus, and what it does is it will do this as a division. It will treat this as a division, so dividing 10 by 2, but instead of actually showing the answer of that, it will show you the remainder. So if, let's get rid of that. So if I made another one down the bottom here, if I did 10 and 3, so we know that 3 goes into 10 3 times and it has a remainder of 1. So the answer for that one should be 1. So that's quite a good way of finding odd and even numbers. Now, that is as far as we're going to go really at the moment with regards to the math side of Python. We don't really need to go any further at the moment. Like I said, if you want to do your own research, there's loads of information out there with regards to this. Now, there is actually one other thing I'm going to go into is the order. So if I could combine all of this, I'm not going to, but I could combine all of this into one print statement. So I'll combine some of it. So what I'm going to do is just stick to one line. So if I've got 2 plus 2, and I'm going to say times 5 divided by 2. Now, Python does follow an order which is called Pemdas. And what that is, let me comment that, is it is parenthesis first, that's P. Exponent, so for example, to the power of. Multiplication. Division. Addition. And lastly, subtraction. So that is the order that Python will work things out if you have it in this setup here. So, for example, if we wanted to work this out, we could do 2 plus 2 is 4. So if we did it from left to right, let's say, so 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 times 5 is 20, 20 divided by 2 is 10. So that would give us an answer of 10. If we ran that, you can see it's 7. So I'm just actually going to do that. So it's 7. So looking at this Pemdas, what it's going to do is it's going to look for any parentheses first, which it hasn't got. These don't count because they are part of the Python code. Then it's going to look for exponents, which we don't have any. We haven't got any to the power of in here. It's going to look for multiplication. Now we have multiplication. So it's going to do that first. So it's going to do this. It's going to do 5 times 2 or 2 times 5, which is going to be 10. It's now going to then move down to the next one, which is division. So we've basically got 10 here. So the next bit is to the right, which is this division. So it's going to do 10 divided by 2, which is going to be 5. So it's now essentially going to replace that with a 5. And then it's going to look for the next one, which is addition, and it will add the 2 together. 5 plus 2 equals 7. So if I go back, if I really wanted Python to add the 2 and 2 together first, I can look at this Pemdas and I can see that anything that is in parentheses, it will work out first. So if I were to put this 2 plus 2 inside parentheses, then print it, we would get our original answer of 10 because it's doing this first. It's doing 2 plus 2, which is 4 times. Then it's going to move on to the next one, which is multiplication times 5, 20, then division, which comes down to 10. So that is something to bear in mind for the future. Now, input. An input is basically getting feedback from the user, so the person that's using the program. Basic input looks like this. So the print was like this. And input is input. Who is your best friend? Now I'm going to get rid of that because we know about print. So if I run that, it's going to come up, it's going to prompt down the bottom here, it's going to say who is your best friend, which is what we've written at the top here. I'm going to say, let's say Jack, and then that's it. The program finishes because we've not told it to do anything else. So what's happening is the answer Jack is essentially replacing this command here. But because we've not told Python to do anything with that, it's just going to end the code. But that is the basics to the input function. Now, as you can see, again, there's no space here. So all we can do is at the end of the question, just put a little space there. So next time we run it, when we actually type it in, it automatically generates the space for us. So we can print the input. So what we can do is we can get rid of that, start again. So we're going to say we want to print something. What do we want to print? We want to print the outcome or the output of an input. So we can write input, just like we did earlier. And then we can put our question. Who is your best friend? If I run that, I put Jack. And here we go, it prints Jack at the bottom. So this is basically what we ran a second ago, except all we're doing is enclosing it inside a print statement. So once Python has run the input and it's grabbed hold of the answer and it's stored it in here, it's now going to print it out on the next line, which is Jack. Another way we can do it, so we can say print. We could say something like your best friend is. I'm going to put a space there. So we're going to close the string. I'm going to put a plus so that it concatenates the next sentence I'm going to put with your best friend is. And I'm going to put my input here. Who is your best friend? So if I run this, it's going to ask me again, who is your best friend? I'm going to put Jack, and it prints it out at the bottom. Your best friend is Jack. So Python comes down, it sees the input first. So it's going to write that out here. Who is your best friend? That's the first thing it's going to do is get your best friend. Once you fill it out, it's then going to basically, like I explained before, replace this with the answer, which is going to be Jack. Then it's going to come back to the beginning. It's going to read print it's gonna print your best friend is, which is inside a string. It's going to concatenate the answer of the input, which in this case is Jack, just like that. And this is your result. Your best friend is Jack. Now we will do more with input functions and strings and formatting and stuff like that. On the next bit, which is talking about variables. So a variable is basically a way to store data, to store a value. So for example, a typical variable is going to be age, let's say, and I'm going to say 30. Now, I'm going to use a print, and down here I am going to say my age is years old. Sorry. Right, there we go. So this is a basic variable. So we've got the string 30, and Python is essentially storing this value of 30 inside the name age. Now this can be anything you want. So when you name variables, you ideally try and keep it as relevant as possible. So because this is going to be my age, I'm not going to name it name because it has no relevance to what it actually is. So you try and keep it relevant. It can have letters, it can have underscores, and it can have numbers, but it cannot start with a number. So you could say age. So if you were taking lots of different ages, so if I had this, now I could say age underscore 2, age underscore 3. So I could have it like that if I wished, and then I could put underscore 1 here if I wanted to. So I could have it like that. You couldn't have age 2 or 2 age and 3 age because it would just mess up the code. So I'm going to get rid of that. So this is basically a variable. So a variable stores it here, and it allows you to call this value as many times as you like. So if I have lots of lines of code and I know that I'm going to be calling my age many times, rather than having to write it out each time, I can just simply call this name here, and that's it. And then that way, if I wanted to change my age, so next year if I would be 31, if I imagine I had this statement, this print statement many times, then all I'd have to do is change it once and it would just change everything that has this variable in, because it's taking it from here up here, which is holding the value of 31. Now notice when I did my print that the variable was not inside quotes. So I had my name is, which I just want printed out. As you can see down the bottom here, my name is. So I've enclosed that in double quotes. I'm going to put the plus to concatenate whatever's next. And when you put a variable, you don't put it inside quotes. If I were to put it inside quotes, it would simply just write the word age, because remember, it will just print whatever is inside that. So by removing these, I'm actually telling Python that this is a variable, and to find it, which it's found it up the top here, and it's going to fill that with the string 31. Then the plus is going to concatenate this with the outcome of this. So what we can do is sometimes you may get a bit confused as to what type a variable is. So remember the data types: we can have a string, we can have a integer, a float, or a boolean. Now, you'll see later on that depending on what you do, you can't necessarily mix a string with an integer. So sometimes you have to try and work out if a variable is a string or an integer or a float and then convert it. So for example, if I have name is Jason, I'm going to get rid of that because in theory this isn't a string, it can be a number. Now, if I wanted to see, and then let's just say number is going to be 12.2. Right. So if I wanted to see what each one of these are, if I wanted to see if what type, age, name, and number is, I can just do print, and then I'm going to put type, and then I'm going to start with age. So all that's doing is that is going to print. That's going to just display the following. So it's going to display type, and type will tell us what type these variables are. So essentially all it is type that. So that's all that is. By putting a print before it, I'm telling Python that I actually want to see the outcome, otherwise it won't show it. And what I'm putting inside the parentheses is the variable that I want it to test. So in this case, it's going to be age. So I'm going to print that. You can see it comes down the bottom here. Class is integer, so I know that age is integer. If I were to put my quotes around it, you can see class now becomes string because it's inside the quotes. So if I were to do this 3 times, change this to name, change this to number, print. Now you can see that the first one, age, is an integer, second one is a string, third one is a float, and then if I could also put value, let's say true. Print type value. If I were to run that, now it adds the bottom one down here, which tells you that it's a boolean, which it is because we put true. Same if I was to put false, it would still be the same. So type is something that is quite handy to remember and can be quite useful, especially when you start getting into more complicated programs and you start getting a bit confused as to if something is considered a string or a float. So we would use type just to confirm whether it is or it's not. So we're going to move on to, I'm still sticking to variables, but I want to move on to the following. So let's say age is 3. So we've got a variable here. We're going to talk about pet. So this is going to be a dog. Pet, I'm going to word it a bit better. So pet name is tiny. Now I could write the following. Now we will see what happens. I'm going to say my pet's name is. Pet's name. Now, oh, I didn't show you that. So with variables, if you start writing out a variable, so say I write PE, you can see here it starts to highlight. So here it's highlighted pet name, which is what I want. If I click tab on my keyboard, it will auto complete it, which is what I do quite a lot because it's quicker. So plus, so this should all hopefully look familiar. So space, and she is age, years old. So when I run this, I have got an error. Hang on, why have I got an error? So my pet's name is, oh sorry, I forgot plus. I expect an error, but that's the wrong type of error. So There we go. So this is the error I was expecting. Now, Python will tell you what the error is. So we have an error on line 6, so it's good practice to get into reading errors. And it's this line here. And the error is a type error. Can only concatenate strings to strings, not integers. So remember when we did our type test, it said that this was an integer and this was a string. So Python is struggling to join all this together, this whole sentence together, because we have different types. We have a string here, we have a string here, and then right in the middle we've now got an integer, which is where it's getting confused. So what we can do is we could go up here and we could convert it to a string just by putting the double quotes, and that's fine. But if we didn't want to do that, if we wanted to keep that as an integer, you could come down here and we could convert this into a string before it gets executed. And by doing that, we could type in str and then surround the variable name in parentheses. By doing that, it now runs as it should. My pet's name is Tiny and she is 3 years old. And all we've done is we've converted this into a string, but this will still remain an integer because it's a temporary conversion that we are doing down here. Now, another way that we can do it, which is a way that I will be using for most things, is we could write it like this. So we can do print and we can put an F, which is a format string. So we put an F and then we just write the string out. So my pet's name is, and we don't need to close the string like we've done further up. So further up here, we've got the string, we've had to close it, put the plus, variable name, blah, 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 all the way across. Here, we don't have to do that. We can just put an open and close curly brackets and put the variable name inside. So my pet's name is pet name, and she is, same open and close curly brackets, age 3 years old. Now, if I run that, I get exactly the same outcome down the bottom here. So this top one is the first print statement. Second one is this statement here. So this is much easier to write, and you just need to remember to put the F before the start of the string double quote or single quote if that's what you're using. So we'll put the F there, and the variable is surrounded by curly brackets, and that is literally it. So while we're here, I'm going to get rid of this because I don't really use it much now. So while we're here, we're going to go through some formatting. So what I can do is, if let's say I were to put a lowercase t. Now, when I want it to print, so when it prints, it's obviously going to show a small t, but I don't want that. I want it to be a capital T. Now, what I can do is, within the curly brackets, after the variable name, I can put a full stop and title, and open and close parentheses. So just like that. If I run that, you can see here that it automatically capitalizes Tiny. So it will capitalize any new word that is within the string. So if I were to put Tiny Haze, run, you can see it capitalizes the T and the H even though it's not up here. Now this is handy, for example, if you were to have an input. So yeah, so for example, if you were to have an input and you were storing data, you wanted it stored nice and neatly. So it was, the question was people's names. So you were asking users for their names. You want it to be stored with capital letter at the start of the first and the last name. But a lot of people don't actually write capitals. They will just write it as I have here. So it will be a small t and a small h. So when you grab that, or when you print out the results later on, you can actually include this into it. And no matter how they write this, it will always show it like that. So you have got other things as well. So we can say upper. Now upper will turn everything into uppercase. So I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to get rid of the age, and I'm going to just get rid of all that because there's nothing else now, and just keep pet name dot upper. So that makes it a little bit easier. So you can see here, Tiny Haze is capitalized by putting that. So if I were to do it the other way around, so if I put everything in capitals, and then here I put lower, not loser, lower, it will convert everything to lowercase. So another thing that I can do is I can put is upper. So what this will do is it will check to see if the string inside the variable pet name is in uppercase. If it is, it will print true. Now if I were to say is lower, it's going to come back with false because it's not in lowercase, it's in uppercase. Now the other thing that I can do is if I were to say, I'm going to put this in normal, get rid of that. So that will just print Tiny Haze. So if I accidentally ended up putting a space after Haze, so there's a space here, I'm going to print that, and when I highlight this you will see the space after the E. So if I wanted a program that removed all the space at the end, so it just had it like that, I can write dot r strip, and then if I run that, even though that still remains the same, before it prints it, it will remove any space on the right. So you can see here now it ends at the end of the E. Same applies. If I have a space at the start, I can just change that from R, which stands for right, to L, which stands for left. Do the same again, and I should have shown you first. So you can see here there's a space at the beginning there. I bring that back, so L strip, it removes the strip, it removes the space there, even though there's a space at the top here. Now there's quite a few of these, which I've included a link in the description which you can have a look through yourself and have a play about with. So something else I wanted to show you is the find. Now if I were to say create another variable here, let's say let's just put number, put number equal to, can't remember if I need to enclose this in brackets, so I'm going to try it first. So let's say number 2, get rid of that space. I'm going to replace this with find and put variable name, which can be number. Hang on a minute, it's wrong. So if I did, okay, so what we can do is to find. So we've grabbed hold of the variable Tiny Haze. We are telling Python to find the letter Y within this string. So, and that is because we have put the number variable in here, which equals Y. So by doing that, it has found, it's printed that the letter Y is located at the 3rd position. So in coding, everything it starts with a 0. So T isn't 1, it's 0. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3. You can see here that is 3. Now I'm guessing, I don't know why I did it like that. I'm guessing we could just put it in there, maybe like that. and it does the same. So yeah, so you could put it in here anyway. So if we wanted to put E, it would say it's at position 8, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There you are. So that's another, that can be quite handy in the future. Something else I wanted to talk about, going back to the numbers side. So we could say, for example, if I make two variables, I'm just going to say x is equal to 10. Actually, now x is equal to 2. Y is equal to 10. So what I can do is I can use print. I can put min x and y. So this is obviously quite basic, and you probably can't see the point in it because it's a basic. But what this is going to do is it's going to you input the variables here that you want to compare. So the min statement will actually find the minimum value. So as we know, we can see it here, the minimum value is x. So we just place them in here, we run it, and it will come back and it will tell you that the minimum value is 2. If we change this to max, it will tell us that it is 10. So it's searched this, or it's compared x with y, and for max it's found that 10 is higher than 2, so it's going to print that. Now we can do another thing, we can do pow, which is the power of. You print that, and all it does is it just replaces this x with a 2 and this y with a 10. So 2 to the power of 10, and it prints that out. So again, there's loads of these which you can look at in the link that I will put in the description. Now, I think we have one more thing to go through, which is the variables using an input. So as you know, we have our inputs, and we're going to say, what is your best friend's name? Okay, so if we wanted to print the answer out, what we can do with a variable is we can store the answer in a variable. So I'm going to put best friend equals. So what that's going to do is that is going to print this out. So I'll run it actually. So it's Python's come down to here. It's seen that there's an input, and you've asked what is your best friend's name. I'm going to put my best friend's name, Jack. So that has now sent that answer, Jack, over to this variable, best friend. So this best friend is essentially the same as just having Jack. The reason nothing's happened is because we've not told Python what to do with that, so it's just ended it. So now what I can do is I can come down and I can print best friend. Now remember, when this isn't a string, this is a variable. So if we put this inside double quotes, it's just going to print out best friend. But I don't want it to do that. I want it to print out the result of this top line here. So we don't enclose it in quotes. And now, even if I highlight, I mean, it's something helpful with Pycharm. If I click on this, it will tell me that it's linked to this because it's highlighted both. So you can see that this here is linked to this variable up here. If I run this, do the same again, Jack. Now you can see it prints out Jack. So I could make this look a little bit nicer. And I'm going to put my F string. Your best friend's name is curly brackets, best friend, full stop at the end, and I'm going to run that. What's your best friend's name? Jack. And then it prints out your best friend's name is Jack. So if I wanted to make it look a bit nicer, so if I was the type of person that didn't capitalize the J, it would show it like that, which I hate. So I'm just going to put my dot title, which we've covered, open and close parentheses. So even if I put Jack with a small j, it will automatically capitalize the J here. So that is the best use of a variable with regards to an input. So that way you can store it, and then we can use it as many times as we like later on in the code. So now I believe it's time for our first challenge. So if we come back here, we have installed Python and Pycharm. We've covered the print statement, data types, numbers and maths, input functions, variables. So now we have the basic challenge number 1. So this is the first challenge. So I have a summary here. So it's create a program that will ask for the full name, the birth year, and the age that they think they will live to. With that information, we need to work out their actual age, because all they've done is given us their year of birth, and how long that they have to live based on their current age and based on the answer they gave here, which is the age they think they'll live to. Now, when you code something, when you make a program, best thing to do is to try and break it down. So we're going to break it down into individual problems, and by solving each individual problem, we will hopefully solve the big problem of creating this program. Now we need to get the full name. So getting the full name, ideally we want it to be an input. The same with getting the birth year, it's going to be an input. Getting the age they think they'll live to, also an input. Now working out their current age is going to be a calculation. Saving the current year. So in order to find their current age, we need the year that we are currently in. So we need a variable for that. And we then need to work out how long they have left to live, which again is a calculation. So as we code, it's a good idea to also use print statements throughout the code. And what that will do is that will help us check for any errors. Because if you end up writing a whole program without checking, then when it comes to actually running it, you could end up with loads and loads of errors that you have to sit down and go through. If you use print statements throughout, which I'll show you, then if there's a problem, then it's a lot easier to fix than right at the end when you have lots and lots of code to go through. So this is the program. So I've written it already, and I'm going to show you how it works. So it says, what is your first name? Jason. What is your last name? Haze. What year were you born? 1990. What age do you think you will live to? So I'm just going to say 87. And then it prints out, your first name is Jason, last name is Haze, and you are 31 years old. If you were to live until you reach the age of 87, that means you have 56 years left. So now I will go through how I wrote this code. Like I said, I'm still new to all this and I'm still learning, so it's not going to be the neatest code and perhaps not even the best code, but it works, and it is with what I've learned as a beginner, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people that are watching this are also beginners. So in theory, you're going to be thinking the same. So let's go through the code. So I'm going to get my little breaking it down list up. So the first thing you want to do is we need to get their full name. So we know that we need an input so that the user can type in their first and their last name. So we want to store those in something that we can call upon later on. So that is going to be a variable. So I'm going to name my variable something that's relevant, which is first name. That's going to be equal to an input. I'm going to say, what is your first name? Remember the space so it looks nice and neat. I also want to know their last name. Last name, exactly the same. Input, what is your last name? Now, let's go back. What else did we want? So we've got the full name. We want to get their birth year. That's also going to be an input. So here I can write birth year, something relevant. Input, what year were you born? What else? So the next bit is we want to ask getting the age they think that they will live to. Now I've ordered this the wrong way around, so I'm actually going to grab working out So saving the current year. So let's just move that to here. Working out the current age. Okay, so that makes it a little bit better because these are relevant. So these three are relevant, getting the birth year, getting the current year, working out their age, and these two are relevant as well. So we have getting birth year, we have that already. Saving the current year as a variable. So the current year for me is 2021, it's just started. So I'm going to put current year equals, as an integer, because it is, 2021. The next thing, working out the current age. So we need to work out their current age based on the year that they gave us. Now, if I were to use a calculator, I could just do the current year, 2021, minus the year that I was born, 1990, and that would give me back 31. So what I could put here is create another variable saying current age. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say current year minus the birth year. So what that's going to do is that's going to take the current year, which is 2021, it's going to place it into here. It's then going to grab the input that I put in, which is stored in the variable name birth year, and it's going to place it here, and it's going to do the calculation, and then it's going to store the results in current age here. Now, because this is these are all simple, okay, we know these work. Now, this is the first actual bit of code that we need to check if it works. So all I'm going to do is just do a print, and then current age. So all that should do is just print the value that's held in here, which is this, the result of this. Now I'm going to get an error. Right, well, it would appear. Oh, here we go. It froze for a minute. So Jason Haze 1990, and I get an error. Okay, so let's have a look at what this error is. Now, line 6 is this one here. Type error, unsupported, operand types 4, subtraction, integer, and a string. Okay, so it's struggling because we are asking Python to do a mathematical operation between an integer and a string. So we have the current year, which is this one here, is an integer, as we know. This here is a string, and we know it's a string because it's got these parentheses. So what can we do? We can convert this into an integer. So this is always going to be a number because we're asking for the year that they were born. It's not going to be letters, it's not going to be a string, it will be a number just like we have here. So what we can do is before the input we're going to put int and surround this whole thing in parentheses. Now you have seen something like this already but with string, so we converted it the other way around. We converted an integer to a string by using str. So all we're going to do to convert it into an integer is just use int, surround whatever we want it to convert in parentheses. Now, if I print this out, Jason Haze 1990, we get 31. So we know that that works. Now, technically, if you wanted this to stay a string, you could do the conversion down here, integer, or int, sorry, surround that in parentheses. There we go, we get the same. So by doing this, it's sort of a temporary conversion. So as soon as this line is finished, if you call it again, it will call it as a string. So if I came down here, so we'll do a little test. Now, if I go back to how it was. So I'm going to convert this into an integer. I'm going to print type birth year. So I'm going to run this. Jason Haze 1990. So this type is testing to see what class or what data type this birth year is, and we can see that it is considered an integer because we have permanently converted it to an integer based on this here. So if I didn't want that, if I wanted it to remain a string, if I came down here, did the same. So we know this is going to work because it worked a second ago. So I'm going to run it again. So now this time, we haven't changed this. It's still testing the birth year, but it's now a string. So it started off as a string. It's come down to here. It's been converted into an integer. And when that's finished, it's now gone back to being a string. So that's how using the type can be quite helpful. I'm not going to keep this here though, because a birth year is always going to be a number, an integer. So I'm just going to keep that there. Okay, so we can comment this out. We'll probably use this a bit later on. Right, so far so good. The next bit. So the next bit we want to grab is getting the age that they think that they will live to. Just like the rest of it, it's going to be a variable. So I'm going to put a little space here. Now we can name this life expectancy. And we are going to put an input, and we're going to ask, we're going to say, what age do you think you will live to? Next bit, working out how long they have left to live. So that's going to be a calculation. For this, we're going to create another variable to hold the result. Remaining years. Did I spell remaining right? Yeah, so remaining years, and all we're going to do is, so we have got the current age, and we have now also got the age that they think they will live to. So what we're going to do is very similar to the current age here. We're going to get hold of the life expectancy first, and we are going to do the subtraction and then current age. So that's going to grab the life expectancy answer, place it in here. So if I put 80, that's going to replace that with 80. Then my current age, which we worked out, was going to be 31. So it's going to put 31 here. So it's going to take 31 off 80. That will give us how many years we have left. And it's going to keep that in the remaining years. So we can test that. We can change this to remaining years and let's run it. So Jason Haze, 1990, what age? Let's say 89. And we have another error. It should look common or look like something we have dealt with before, and that is because life expectancy has been classed as a string, but current age has been classed as an integer. So all I'm going to do is, like we did before, convert that into an integer, run it again, 80, and we have 49. Okay, so now we have everything running. So everything is getting the information it needs and working everything out. So now all we need to do is print it so that it looks nice. So we are going to have our print statement. We're going to use our f string. We're going to say your first name is curly brackets first name. Now I want it to capitalize the first letter regardless if I type it in with a capital J or not. So I'm going to use my title, open close parenthesis. Last name is curly brackets, last name, exactly the same with the title, and I believe that was it. Then the next line, so we can use the print or we can use the \n. I'm just going to use the print if give me a second. Oh, hang on, I missed out some bits on the first bit here. So we've got last name, title, and we're going to say, and you are curly brackets. We want current age, years old. Now back to this one. if you were to live until you reach the age of curly brackets life expectancy. I'll go through all this in a second. That means you have remaining years left. So I'm just going to run this, make sure it works. It should. Jason Haze, 1990, 67, let's say. First name's Jason, so it's capitalised J, even though I didn't at the top here. Same with Haze. You are 31 years old. If you live until you reach the age of 67, that means you have 36 years left. So I know I went through this quite quickly, writing this out, so we're going to go through it now. So we've used the F string, which we've been through before, we've used before. Your first name is curly brackets, so we've grabbed the first name. So this is the first name that they put in. So the name that they typed in is kept in this variable here, first name. And we have just included the title format so that it capitalizes the J. We've done exactly the same with the last name, so it's grabbed this variable at the top here, capitalized the H in this case, and you are current age. So the current age is coming from here, which has been worked out by taking the birth year off the current year. Next bit, if you were to live until you reach the age of life expectancy. So life expectancy is the number that we asked them to put in for the age that they think that they will live to, and that is kept under this variable here. That means you have remaining years left, so we have this variable left, and this variable is worked out by removing their current age from the age they think that they will live to, which gives us their remaining years of life left. Might be a bit of a morbid subject, I know, but it's quite good to use a little bit of everything that we've learned. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's the first challenge. So now we are going to move on to the second challenge, which I think is a little bit more tricky. It actually took me quite a lot longer to do the second one, not because of the code, but just because I suck at maths and I just kept working everything out wrong. So I'll show you what the next challenge is. So this is the second challenge. So the summary is a group of friends go out for a meal. None of them take any money with them except for one who is left to pay. So he or she pays for everyone, and they all need to work out how much they owe that person. Now, just to make it a little bit more complicated, that person is quite annoyed that they've had to pay for the whole meal. So they decide that they want to add interest onto the amount that is owed. So we need to create a program that works all that out. So remember, we need to break it down. We need to get hold of the total amount that the bill came to without interest. We need to also know how many people went. We need to know how much interest they want to charge. We need to work out how much the interest is based on the amount of the meal. We then need to work out what the total amount is plus the interest. Then we need to divide that total amount by the number of people, which will give us how much each person has to pay. So here is the program. I'll show you it working. So first question is, what is the name of the person who is owed the money? I'm going to say Jack. What is the total amount of money owed? I'm going to say £185.65. How many people owe Jack? So let's say 6 people went out for the meal. And because he's annoyed, he's going to charge 19% interest. So that has a result of each person owes Jack a total of £36.82. So I can come to my calculator to just make sure that worked out correctly. So if we did £185.65, multiply that by the percent, which is 0.19, that gives us 35.27. So we're going to add the 35.27 onto the 185.65. So the total amount is £220.92. We're going to divide that by the number of people that went, which is 6. And that will give us £36.82, which is what we have in our answer down here. Now, let's go through writing this code out, shall we? Okay, let's get our notepad back. So, breaking it down, how much was the total amount? Okay, so I'm going to make some notes at the top here. So, this is where comments come in handy. I'm going to have an example amount, number of people, and percentage, just so it makes it a bit easier to work out the code as we go. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to pretend that the total bill was £214.62p. I'm going to pretend that the total, or say amount of people, was 6, and I'm also going to say that he charged or she charged the interest of 26%. So everything that we write is going to be based on this, which makes it a little bit easier for me to explain. So the first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to get hold of the name of the person who paid. So we're going to create a variable just like we did before on this last challenge. Owed person equals input. What is the name of the person who is owed the money? Nice and simple. The next bit, how many people, oh yeah, I missed that bit out at the top here. Name of the person, just add that in anyway, name of the person owed. Next one, how much was the total amount? Now the variable, total amount. We're going to have an input to ask them, what is the total amount owed? How many people went and how much interest are they charging? So we want to know how many people went. So total people, another input. How many people owe? I forgot my F at the start. How many people owe? Owed person. So what we're doing here is we are, hang on, let me just finish that off, title. So what we're doing here is we are grabbing this name here, so whoever is owed the money, and we are just including it into this input here. So it will show, so if I put in Jack, it will show how many people owe Jack. I'm using a title so that it capitalizes the first J, and that's that. Now, I forgot up here, I want to put a pound sign, so it looks a bit nicer. You'll see when I run the code. What was next? So we've done the total amount of people, how many people went, how much interest are they charging? So we will say interest charged. Again, this is going to be another input. We're going to say how much interest is he or she charging, and in parentheses we're going to put in percentages. Question mark and a space. Okay, so we have our basic questions all laid out. So now what we need to do, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grab the interest and I'm going to convert that into something that Python can use, something that Python can multiply. So I'm going to convert that into a decimal form. So our interest here is 26%. So for Python to be able to use that, I'm going to convert that to 0.26. To do that, we divide it by 100. So I'm going to say interest converted. So that is now a variable, and inside that variable I am going to keep the interest charged and divide that by 100. So I'm going to put a little comment here so we can see. So based on the amount, it's 26% divided by 100, which equals 0.26. So what we're doing here is we are grabbing hold of the interest charged, which is this variable here, which the user puts in. We're dividing it by 100. That result is being kept in interest converted. So I am now going to print, because again, I know that this is going to work because they're quite simple input request. So this is the first actual proper working out that we've needed. So I'm going to print that to just make sure it works. Interest converted. So let's see whatever we come up with. Here is the money owed to Jack. 214.65. How many people went? 6. 26%. We get an error. So again, we've seen this as line 10. Type error unsupported for string and integer. So we have an integer here, and this has been classed as a string. So nice and simple. We're just going to convert this to an integer. So that's done. We did this in the last challenge. Jack, what was it? 214.62, 6 and 26%. So that's worked it out. So that has come back to us and said that the interest converted, so the converted interest that Python can use is 0.26%. So we know that everything works so far. Okay, so now what we want to do next, let's have a look. Work out how much interest is based on the total amount. So we need to do that. So we need to multiply the converted interest by the total, the total amount here. So further down, we're going to put, what should we call this? We'll call this the working interest, let's say, working interest. So the working interest is going to be the interest converted. Actually, no, I'm going to do it the other way. So it's going to be the total amount multiplied by the interest converted. And what that's doing, a little comment, what that's going to do is that's going to grab the total amount, which is here. So based on this practice amount, we're going to say the total amount is 214. We just do 214.62, and we're going to multiply that by the interest converted, which we got, and that was 0.26. Now, again, I'm going to do another print. I'm going to print working interest and just see if we are on the right track so far. Jack, 214.62, and 26%. We get an error. So we have an error because can't multiply sequence by non-int of type float. So what's happening is we have the interest converted here is a float because the amount that is stored in interest converted is 0.26, which, as we know, is a float. The total amount here is being classed as a string because it's inside double quotes, so it's being classed as a string. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into a float because we're dealing with money. We're asking what is the total amount owed, and a lot of the time it will always be a decimal number, as you can see here, 214.62. So I'm going to put that as a float. Now, even if I put it as a float, I can still type things in as an integer. So float. So to convert things to a string, it's str. Convert things to an integer, it's int. Convert things to a float, it's a float. So technically, these will match now. These will both be floats because interest converted is a float anyway because of the result. Total amount is also a float now because we have manually converted it into a float. So let's just try that again. So Jack, 214.62, 6 and 26%. So we now have £55 and 80p. So that is the amount of interest we need to add on. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to work that out. So 214.62, multiply that by 0.26, and here we have 55.8. Now, that number, so £55 and 80p, we need to add on to the total amount. So we're going to come down here, we're going to write the final bill. So remember, it needs to be the total amount and we are going to add on the working interest, which would have been the £55.80. Now I'm going to just print the final bill. So here I'm going to add the total of 21462 plus, what was it, 55.80. Now I'm going to print this and I'm going to just make sure everything works again as it should. So Jack 21462 6 26%. We now have a total of £270. So let's work that out ourselves, shall we? So 21462 plus 55.80 is 270.42. Brilliant. So it works so far. So the next thing we now need to do is we need to divide the total amount by the number of people, so we know how much each person has to pay. So each payment, let's say, we're going to get hold of the final bill. We are going to divide that by the total amount of people. A comment, so that is going to say the total amount, which was, what was the total amount? 270, that's down there, 270.42 divided by the total amount. In this case, it's 6. Now I'm just going to change this so that it will print each payment instead. So let's print. I believe I'm going to get an error. So 21462 626. So we have an error. Same again, type error. We're trying to divide a float with a string. The final bill is a float. The total people is a string. Again, we can convert this. So we can convert this to an integer if we want, and it will still work it out, I believe. 21462 6 26%, and we have £45.07 that is owed to each person. So let's just work that out. So that was 270, that's the total amount. We're going to divide that by the 6 amount of people, so £45.07. Brilliant. So what we need to do now is get rid of the everything after the second decimal place. So we want it just to show £45.00. So what we can do with that is we can first of all, let's just print it so it looks a bit nicer. Actually, no. Let's go with a rounded. Let's just round a number. So we're going to go with rounded total. We're going to use a round function. So it's just going to round the number that is kept in the variable each payment, and we're going to put the number 2. So number 2 will tell Python that you want to round it up to the second decimal place. We're telling Python that we want to round the number that is stored in each payment, which is £45. That result will be kept in a variable called rounded total. So we will print that. Jack, 2, what was it? 21462. You think I'll remember by now? 6 26. So there we are. That's better. Now I discovered that there is a problem using this function here, which I had to look up. So the problem is that as long as the second decimal place isn't 0, it's fine. It will show it. So you can see it shows 07. If this is a 0, it just doesn't display it. So I will show you an example. So I'm going to put the amount of £150. I'm going to say there's 5 people and we're charging 12%. So that generates £33.60. So you can see it doesn't show the 0, which is fine. But if we want this to be in currency format, then ideally we want the 0 to show. So I had to look online. Now, I don't know if I can remember what I typed in. Round up to 2 decimal places with trailing zeros Python. Something like this. Was it this one, Stack Overflow? I read through all this and it was one of these answers formats. So use modern style with format function. So what we need is we need this here. Now, don't bother about this because this is just his method. So if I try and minimize this so we can see. Now, this is basically this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out rounded total. I'm going to put in what he wrote down to F, close curly brackets. Now I'm going to put format. Instead of putting the method that he put, I'm just going to put the variable in of the amount that we want to format. So I'm going to just check this before I talk about it. Jack. So it's 150, 5 and 12. And now you can see it shows the 0. And then even if we wanted to just do our original amount, so it was 21462. 6 people, was it? Can't remember now. Can't even find it. Yeah, 6 people, 26%. Still shows £45.07. So if we get back up his one, so sometime, well, a lot of the time you'll have to Google things. It's just not possible to remember everything, I don't think anyway. So as long as you have the basics and you have the ability to be able to search yourself, then you'll be fine. Now, you can see here, I've copied this bit. So we've got the format here, and rather than having all this, so all he's doing is he's telling, sorry, so this is an issue, that round issue where it didn't show the 0 is a format issue with Python. So what he's doing here is he is rounding up the number 2606.89 blah 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 blah. He is rounding that to the second decimal place, which we discovered, right? We did that, didn't we? Now that would result in not showing the 0, so that would just result in 2606.9. But by adding this format change here, it's now going to show 0. So that's all this is. So this isn't really that crucial. So we can just change that, like we have done, to our variable each payment, which holds this result of final bill divided by the total amount of people. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit nicer. So I'm going to say my F string, each person owed person, title, and then we want the rounded total. So I'm just going to print this again. Jack 21426, I hope it was, I can't remember again. 26%. And we have 44. Did I have to do something wrong? Oh yeah, I did it wrong. But anyway, so there you go. Now I'm going to do it with a higher amount. So let's say it was Jack. Let's say they went out somewhere really expensive. It cost them £435.43. But there was only 4 of them that went. And he wants to charge a massive 32%. So you can see each person owes Jack £143.69. So that is it. Now, you can see this is quite a good one because you can see that it's good to have comments because it has helped us work through the code. Now, I'm pretty sure there is a nice way to code this, but like I explained, I am still a beginner, and this works, and it's using what I have learnt so far. Now, the next video is most probably going to be a video about lists, and then the one after that is most probably going to be about for loops. And hopefully you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please subscribe and like it, and I will hopefully have the next video up in a day or two. So I will see you on the next video.